Good morning and welcome back to Gaming with ADHD, where today we are going to be continuing our deep dive into the rules from Battletech, a game of armored combat. That is the core rules for Battletech, basically pretty much as basic as you are going to find, while still actually using all of the rules. I am joined today, as always, by a Skaz or Skaven AZ or Chris or whatever my brain's going to call him at the moment. How you doing, buddy?
I'm not awake yet. Leave me alone.
That's supposed to be my line. Why are you stealing my line?
Hey, man. I woke up when you're still in the middle of work, and I haven't slept since then. So you should be more awake than me.
That's fair. I should. I'm not, but I should.
I mean, You're acting like you are, at least.
I fake it really well. Anyway, so we'll stall for a couple minutes, wait for anyone to show up. I was bad at posting this on social media, so we're a little behind, but that's kind of how we roll it here at Gaming with ADHD. So how has your week been going?
Week has been busy. Memorial Day was a 4-day honeydew list. So
4-day honeydew list?
4-day
Friday off too?
I took the Friday off to hang out with fam, and so I did lots of things around the house.
Yeah, I probably should be doing things around the house, but that's a lot of work.
I mean, it kind of is. So it's been busy.
Good. All right. Well, let's see here. I'm getting beeps all of a sudden. Oh, I should turn that off. Let's turn the desktop audio off. We're not going to need it for this. I don't need my beeps coming through. Anyhow. All right. So let's see. All right. So last week we talked about damage. Was it just damage?
Heat.
Right. Damage and heat.
Yes.
Okay. Which mean right. So today for everyone, we're going to talk about actions. Basically, this is all of the stuff that didn't fit into kind of the basic, order of operations for a round of play. So sort of a kind of a miscellaneous catch-up section. And we are also going to talk about mech construction. Now, for some people who might show up in the audience, mech construction is a bit of a contested part of the game because it does allow players to break things, or I was gonna say get a little bit ridiculous. So we'll talk about it because it is part of the game, and I'm actually kind of shocked that they put it in Game of Armored Combat. For super basic rules, I was not expecting to see that included. So
I mean, it's been a core part of the game for a long period of time, though. So I get why you think it not in the newbie basic rules, but at the same point in time, it's what people that love playing with big stompy robots love building big stompy robots.
That's true. Like I said, I'm just kind of shocked that they still have it in the basic game, which now that I think about it, I probably shouldn't be confused on because the Game of Armored Combat rulebook, this guy right here, this is about the size of the rulebook that existed when the game started, and it had the construction rules in there.
Right.
So, there we go. All right. So before we get started, folks, do make sure that if you are new here, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. We do try to put out a few videos each week covering all sorts of tabletop gaming content, whether it's board games, role-playing, miniatures, or anything in between. In addition, if you are interested in picking up your own game copy of Battletech, There are some affiliate links down in the description. Feel free to use those. No pressure, but always appreciated. All right. And then other than that, like, share, do all the fun YouTube-y things. So, all right, what do you think? Should we get started?
Let's go.
All right. Well, there we go. That's the one I want. All right. Whose turn is it to kick us off this week?
It's always your turn to kick us off.
Okay. Well, then I will. Once I figure out my zoom on this. Nope, that's too much. There we go. All right. While events such as movement or combat generally occur at fixed intervals, there are several important events that can occur at a variety of points in a Battletech turn. Rules that can apply in multiple phases are covered in this chapter. All right, leading off, we've got piloting skill rolls. Mech warriors must make piloting skill rolls under a variety of circumstances. Piloting skill roll is usually made to avoid falling, unless stated otherwise. Failing one means the mech falls. The piloting skill roll table lists the events that require a piloting skill roll. A piloting skill roll is required every time one of these events occurs. If a mech is required to make multiple piloting skill rolls at the same time, for example, if it is kicked and takes 20 points of damage from that kick, both of which force a piloting skill roll, each piloting skill roll is rolled one at a time, but all modifiers are cumulative and apply to all rolls. If one of these PSRs fail, then any remaining PSRs in that sequence are ignored. So once you're on the ground, it doesn't matter. You're there. All right. Let's see. Immobile mechs and unconscious warriors. Mechs that are immobile or that have an unconscious warrior automatically fail any required PSRs if they were standing. Mech damage. If a mech takes 20 or more damage points in a single phase, it makes only one PSR for this, regardless of the final damage total it took that phase. And prone mechs. A prone mech ignores all PSRs required to avoid falls, except when attempting to stand.
One thing to call out about that previous section is that it specifically calls out one thing some people forget about is taking 20 or more damage points in a single phase, not a turn, a phase. So if you take 20 points of damage in the shooting phase, then you take 20 points of damage in the physical combat phase, you're making 2 PSRs. Some people forget about that and want to just tie that all together and say, oh, I took mine this turn already. No. 20 points each phase.
Yeah, like, playing off of that, one, it does say right up here, important events that can occur at a variety of points in a Battletech turn. So there is no, specific, just because you did this once, nope, it's going to come back around later. So, only thing I would clarify would be, it's 20 or more points of damage, not every point 20 points of damage. Not that I've ever run into that situation, but just to make sure people clarify.
Uh-huh.
No, meaning I haven't made the mistake trying to say, oh, you have to take 3 piloting skill rolls because you took 60 points of damage. I just figured, shut up, Chris. All right. Piloting skill rolls use the mech warrior's piloting skill as the base target number modified by the following. Now, this is basically going to be very similar to Gator that we saw during the combat section. You start with your piloting skill, you add in any of your modifiers for terrain, any of modifiers for events. So right here. So modified by the following: all indicated modifiers for the event, all modifiers applied by other events which have already occurred in the same phase. That would be like 20 points of damage and being kicked. All modifiers applied due to pre-existing damage. So if you're already missing that leg, or if you took a gyro hit, all of those modifiers will all get rolled in. The result is the modified target number. To make a piloting skill roll, the player rolls 2d6. If the result is equal to or greater than the modified target number, the roll succeeds. If the result is less than the modified target number, the roll fails, which almost always means the mech falls. A player cannot choose to intentionally fail a piloting skill roll. Exactly when a piloting skill roll is made depends on the phase of the turn and the action that triggers it. Movement phase. Piloting skill rolls required due to a movement action, trying to stand up, entering water or rubble, are made immediately following the action. As such, if a PSR is required due to entering a hex and is failed, the mech falls in that new hex that triggered the PSR. Multiple rolls may be required during movement. For example, if a mech wants to move through 3 hexes of depth 1 water, a PSR is made immediately after each hex is entered. Yeah, I definitely need to remember that next time we play. Not that we use a ton of water in our games, but that's a game changer. That's a lot of piloting skill rolls to fail.
That can be, yeah.
Attack phases. Piloting skill rolls due to attacks made in the weapon or physical attack phases are made at the end of the phase the attacks occurred in. Apply all modifiers resulting from damage that phase. Consciousness rolls. Consciousness rolls are made immediately upon triggering. If both a consciousness roll and a PSR are required at the same time, the consciousness roll comes first. Why does it come first? Because if you fail, you fall. The PSR is kind of worthless at that point. Displacement. Any PSR required due to displacement happens immediately, regardless of the phase. And any PSR made to see if a mech warrior is damaged by a fall is made immediately before applying any damage caused by the fall. So, needless to say, there's lots of little details on this, but the book is not that big. It's easy to quick reference it.
I was going to say this is the session where we are probably going to find lots of little things like I didn't know that.
Yeah. Right. Like, every movement in a depth 1 water hex triggers a piloting skill roll.
Well, if you're going more than 3.
Only if you're going more than 3?
Did you not read what you just read?
Nope. Apparently it did not click.
Brian.
No. For example, if a mech wants to move through 3 hexes, not if it's 3 or more.
Okay. All right. I accept these terms.
Yeah. Right. But again, that is still that's still a lot. I remember that, like, going into this, it's like, okay, I know when you go into water, you have to make a piloting skill roll.
Right.
But the fact that it's every single time,
right.
That's a game changer. All right. Tell us about displacement.
Displacement. A mech forced into another hex is displaced. This typically occurs due to charge, punch, push, and death from above attacks. If a mech is displaced into a hex of the same level or 1 or 2 levels higher, check if the newly entered hex contains another mech. If so, see domino effect in the next page. If a mech is displaced downward, what happens depends on how many levels down the mech is displaced and if the newly entered hex is occupied by another mech. If the hex the mech is displaced into has no other mech in it, is 1 level lower, follow the normal rules called for by the action that caused the displacement. If the hex the mech is displaced into contains another mech and that hex is 1 level lower, a domino effect occurs. If the hex the mech is displaced into has no other mech in it and is 2 or more level lower, an automatic fall occurs. See falling. If the hex the mech is falling into contains another mech and that hex is 2 levels or more, then an accidental fall from above occurs and that mech is displaced. Whew. Big old chart.
So again, folks, this is Battletech. It's not Battletech if it doesn't have all the charts.
Right.
But again, here's the situation. What is the modifier? So same kind of a deal. Just start totaling everything up and figure out your target number.
Right. All right. Actions that cause the displacement often call for a piloting skill roll by the mech being displaced. Any fall that results is a zero-level fall that occurs in the hex the mech is displaced into. However, if the mech is displaced down 2 or more levels, any such PSR is ignored as the mech automatically falls. The fall distance is calculated from the mech's level before the fall as normal. Destroyed mechs. A mech destroyed by an action that would also displace it does not resolve any displacement. Forced off board, a mech placed in a partial hex or off the playing area is considered destroyed for the scenario. Prohibited displacement. A mech cannot be displaced into a hex 3 or more level higher than the hex it was moved from. In such a case, the displacement cannot occur, and neither the target nor attacking mech move unless the action specifically states otherwise. All other effects of the displacing action occur. Timing. Displacement, including any resulting PSRs and damage, is resolved immediately after the action that caused it, regardless of what phase it is. If any damage was inflicted by the action that caused the displacement, apply it before resolving the displacement, even though the phase is not yet ended. If a physical attack might cause displacement and in doing so interrupt another physical attack, the mech with a lower initiative resolves its physical attack first. If both attackers are on the same side, the controlling player may determine which one is resolved first. If no valid target exists, the attack automatically fails. A displacement can also mean a planned physical attack can no longer occur.
Okay. So we haven't ever had to use displacement in one of our games.
We don't do physical attacks. We just shoot each other.
That's true. Maybe we need to run less clan mechs if we want to see some physical combat going on.
I mean, that's hard considering that's what I have.
No, I get that. I get, and actually, and that statement was not me picking on you. That was just saying, this is just like a whole section of rules that we don't use.
Yes. And that's because of the fact that clanners don't believe in physical attacks, number one. Number two, the damage output from the weapons allows it to get much faster and bigger, so you don't have to worry about it. And number three, we generally just don't need to because we just shoot the crap out of each other.
I was going to say, look, first off, clanner philosophy has no meaning here, especially since you do not honor Zelbringen. So, if you've already sacrificed one bit of clanner philosophy, what's to make us think that you're actually going to follow with the rest of it,
I follow Zelbringen, then you guys shoot me more than once, and I just ignore the rest of the time. That's how Zelbringen. Just because y'all are dirty free births that don't follow the rules doesn't mean that I'm
not. All right. Domino effect. If a mech is forced into a hex occupied by another mech, the mech already in the hex, known as the target mech, is forced out of that hex. This is called a domino effect. The target mech immediately makes a piloting skill roll. If the target mech fails its PSR, it is displaced into the hex in the direction opposite the hex side where the intruding mech entered the hex. The target mech then falls in that hex. Dodging a domino effect. If the target mech's PSR is instead successful and the domino effect also originates from one of the target's 4 side hexes, then the target can dodge the domino effect by immediately moving one hex directly forward or backward, so long as all of the following are true. 1, it is mobile. 2, it is standing. 3, it has enough unspent movement points that turn to move into the hex. 4, it did not jump that turn. 5, the hex being moved to does not already have a mech in it. As usual, the mech cannot move backward if it ran that turn. If the target mech's PSR is successful, but it cannot dodge, it is still forced into the next hex as noted above, but does not fall. Okay, I have to bring this up. A side hex. Is that when the hex doesn't want you to know it's checking you out? Therapist, you're a dork. If a mech is the target of a domino effect and there is another mech in the hex it is displaced into, another domino effect occurs. Such domino effects continue as long as mechs remain in hexes adjacent to one another in the direction of the effect. If there is no legal hex for the last mech in a multiple domino effect chain to be displaced into, it is destroyed. Okay. So, all right. None of this actually seems complicated. I can also say that I've literally never done this. But dear Lord, it just feels ridiculously complicated to deal with.
They just spell it all out so you don't have to overthink it or ask the question. But spelling it out means that they cover a lot of things multiple times and then get into the very detailed details. But they give you an answer in case whatever the thing happens.
But I will be honest, just reading over these rules, I would avoid ever trying to trigger a domino effect. Just because I don't want to have to look up the rules on what to do.
Sure.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe that's just me being whiny, but dear Lord.
I don't want to deal with that.
Right. Well, then tell us about falling.
If a mech falls, it suffers damage, and its mech wearer may be injured as well. Location after a fall. When a mech falls while moving from one hex to another, it falls in the hex it was moving into. If a fall occurs because of an attack or any other combat-related reason, the mech falls in the hex it occupies. Unless stated otherwise, mech falls are zero-level falls. This includes mechs that fall due to jumping. However, if a mech is displaced downwards 2 or more levels, subtract the level of the hex the mech's landed in from the level of the hex it was in immediately prior to the fall. This is the number of levels it fell. Falling in collisions. If a mech falls 2 or more levels into a hex occupied by another mech, the two mechs may collide. Facing after a fall. When a mech falls, it takes damage and its facing may change. The facing change determines the hit location table used when assigning damage from the fall. To determine the mech's facing after the fall, and when the mech takes damage, roll 1d6 and consult the facing after fall table, see below. A fallen mech lies prone and falls down. Mechs that fall on their sides or rear automatically roll over to lie face down after taking damage from that fall. Damage arc for prone mechs. If the target mech is prone, use the hex side its head is pointed at as it's facing. Any damage to a prone mech from outside sources such as weapons fire is treated as if the mech was standing with that facing. Falling damage to a mech. A fall deals damage equal to 1 point for every 10 tons that the mech weighs, rounding up, multiplied by the number of levels of +1 that the mech fell. Divide the damage into 5-point damage groupings, and then determine a hit location for each grouping. For example, a mech that suffers 33 points of falling damage takes 6 5-point hits and 1 3-point hit, each assigned as a separate hit. Use the appropriate column of the hit location table as specified by the facing after fall table. If the fall occurs during the movement phase, resolve the damage as it happens. If a mech falls while standing in depth 1 or greater water, it suffers normal falling damage divided by 2. A mech above the water surface falls into the water surface. Suffers normal falling damage divided by 2 for hitting the water surface, and also normal falling damage divided by 2 from the fall from the water surface to the bottom of the water hex. Damage for hitting the water surface equals tonnage divided by 10 times 1/2. Normal damage for hitting the bottom of the water hex equals tonnage divided by 10 times 2, or times depth of water hex +1 times 2 divided by 2. Damage is resolved separately around any fractional final damage values down.
So basically,
I don't want to fall in water either.
Well, no, the funny thing is this actually makes it more complicated than it should be. If you fall while standing in depth 1 water, divide the damage by 2. Great. That's easy.
Yeah.
What they should have done, because, like, all right, a mech above the water surface that falls into water. Okay, so you're on a cliff I'm just going to say a level 0 cliff standing next to depth 2 water. Okay. Actually, we'll just say depth 1 just to keep it easy. It's like you're going to take damage from hitting the water and then also from hitting the bottom of the water feature, whether it's river, lake, whatever.
Right.
To keep it simple, they should have just said take damage, or take full damage, instead of, okay, take half damage for hitting the surface, then take another half damage for hitting the bottom. I realize there's some extra math here, but that would have made it much easier to deal with.
Yeah, but then you don't take into account the fact that you can have somebody fall from 2 levels up on a cliff and fall 5 levels down in water and capture all that damage, which is where they want to do, because they know somehow, some way that's going to happen, because that's why they wrote the rule in case it ever did happen. So if you fall into level 1 water, that's not relevant. Falling into 5 level water makes it really relevant. You take extra damage because you're falling so much further down. All that being said, we've never run into this, and we probably never will. But
right.
It's there in case we need it.
Well, but also it's not just that. It's not just falling into depth 5 water. It's falling from level 5, hitting the water, and then
hitting the ground under the water.
Right, hitting the ground at depth 5.
Right.
So I realize that I'm using some simple numbers where you're like, oh yeah, just times 1 or times 5 or whatever the number would be for falling from height. But I don't know. I think that could be made a little bit easier. All right. Finish off falling damage with the
falling damage to a mech warrior. A player makes a second piloting skill roll after every fall. All modifiers applied to the PSR that caused the fall are applied to the second roll, with an additional +1 modifier applied to the target number for every level above 1 fallen. If the roll succeeds, the mech warrior avoids taking damage. If the roll fails, the mech warrior takes 1 point of damage. A mech warrior automatically takes 1 point of damage if at the time of the fall their mech is immobile, or if the modified target number for the PSR to avoid damage is greater than 12.
Okay. All right. Accidental falls from above. A mech cannot intentionally fall onto another mech. However, if a mech is displaced into a hex 2 or more levels lower than its previous hex, and that hex already contains a mech, then the displaced mech might fall onto the target mech. The displaced mech makes an attack roll with a base target number of 7, modified by target movement and terrain. I mean, because, it's very easy to get your 100-foot mech, or not, 30-foot mech, to land on another 30-foot mech in 100-foot hex. So, just saying.
Saying there's a chance.
If the attack roll fails, the falling mech lands in an adjacent hex as close as possible to the hex from which it fell. If multiple such hexes exist, randomly determine which hex it lands in. Resolve this as a standard fall. If the attack roll is successful, divide the falling mech's weight by 10 and multiply this by the number of levels fallen to the point of impact. Divide this damage by 2 if the target mech is fully submerged. Then divide the damage into 5-point damage value groupings, assigning any remaining points of damage to an undersized grouping, and assign a hit location for each grouping to the target mech using the punch location table. I have to bring this up. Very Silent Mouse, if you want to get pedantic, let's be honest, it's about 95 feet. So, close enough for government work. Just saying. All right. Divide the damage into 5-point damage value groupings and assign a hit location for each grouping to the target mech using the punch location table. Determine the amount of damage to the falling mech as normal for a fall of that height. Roll for facing as normal on the facing after fall table, but the mech always lands on its back, and all damage is applied to the rear. The target mech is immediately displaced to a random neighboring legal hex and must make a piloting skill roll with a +2 modifier or fall in the hex it was displaced into. If there is no legal hex for the falling or target mech to be placed in, that mech is destroyed. All right. Damaging a mech warrior. 3 types of damage to a mech can also damage the mech warrior inside. Head hits, falling, and internal ammo explosions. In addition, excessive heat buildup can harm the mech warrior if the mech's life support system suffers a critical hit. A mech warrior can withstand up to 5 points of damage. The 6th point of damage kills the warrior. Ammunition explosions. An ammo explosion causes 2 points of damage to the mech warrior. Falling. If a mech falls, its controller must immediately make a PSR for the mech warrior, the seatbelt check, before applying any falling damage to the mech. All modifiers applied to the PSR that cause the fall are applied to the second roll, with an additional +1 modifier applied for every level above 1 fallen as well. If the roll fails, the warrior takes 1 point of damage. If the mech is immobile, or if the modified target number for the PSR to avoid mech warrior damage is greater than 12, such a fall automatically damages the mech warrior. All right. Head hits. The mech warrior takes 1 point of damage whenever the mech's head takes a hit, even if the hit did not penetrate the mech's armor. Heat. When a mech's life support system takes a critical hit, the mech warrior takes 1 point of damage at the end of every heat phase that the mech's heat scale is between 15 and 25. If the heat scale is 26 or higher, the mech warrior takes 2 points of damage instead. Keep your air conditioning working, folks. Or not, and make some popcorn. One of the two. Consciousness rolls. Mech warriors can survive up to 5 points of damage, but they must be knocked unconscious but they may. Yeah. That must and may are two totally different things. May be knocked unconscious long before taking that much. Every time a warrior takes a point of damage, its controller must immediately make a consciousness roll. Roll 2d6 and consult the consciousness table. If the result is equal to or greater than the mech warrior's consciousness number, the warrior remains conscious. If the result is less than the consciousness number, the warrior is immediately knocked unconscious. For example, after the first damage, if a player rolls a 2, the pilot is unconscious. If the player rolls 3 or more, the pilot remains conscious. The player makes this roll for every point of damage taken. For example, in the case of an ammo explosion in a mech, that mech warrior will need to make 2 consecutive consciousness rolls. However, if a mech warrior is knocked unconscious, no further consciousness rolls need to be made that turn. A mech with an unconscious warrior becomes immobile. A warrior that takes 6 points of damage is dead. Remove their mech from the map in the end of the phase in which they were killed. I mean, I realize why it would count as destroyed, but if it wasn't actually destroyed, I mean, I guess you could count it like it's completely immobile at that point, so it's like a tree or something.
Right. I mean, it's only relevant if you're doing a campaign where you're trying to get salvage and things like that.
That's true. Yeah. All right. Piloting skill rolls. If a mech warrior is forced to make both a consciousness roll and a PSR at the same time, the consciousness roll always comes first. All PSRs required of an unconscious mech warrior automatically fail.
I just want to point this out. Okay. I get shot in the head. I have to take a consciousness check. I fail the consciousness check. And while being shot in the head, I took 20 points of damage. I have to take a PSR, and I fall. Because I'm falling, I take 2 more points of damage because I fell. I'm at 3 points of damage. I'm unconscious. you
Okay.
still have 2 points of damage to take to your head before you automatically die. It's not common for this to happen. Usually you get shot in the head and you die, it's because you got shot in the head and head got blown off.
Right.
This is not a common thing to lose 5 points of damage, and it takes a lot of random things happening at the same time to get this to happen. Because it talks about ammo explosions giving 2 points of damage to the mech warrior. Well, as we talked about last week, if your mech has an ammo explosion, your mech is probably dead.
Right.
So, it doesn't. Lots of these things are in here, and it sounds like the way we're reading it that it's possible for this to happen often. This does not happen often. This happens less than a lot of the other things we've said don't happen often because the warrior's role is pretty resilient.
That's fair, but we have taken plenty of mech warrior damage.
Yes, but we've never had a mech warrior die to that damage, except for their head being blown off or something like that. We've never gone through 5 boxes of the mech warrior health chart.
Correct. So, but the fact that you are taking damage, like this, I think is important to understand.
Yeah.
Just because of the fact that, like, almost everything else that we've talked about so far today has been like, yeah, we're not using that. Yeah, we've never run into that. This one, I've never lost a pilot to mech warrior damage, but I have had mech warriors get extremely damaged.
Right. I'm not
by
saying
the end
they
of
don't
the
get
game.
damaged. I'm just saying we've never had anybody hit 5 boxes on the chart because of how just
6 is what kills them. 5,
well, yeah.
5, they're still alive.
But it's just so random the way you get damage to a mech warrior, and the fact of the matter is that once you fail that first consciousness check, you have to roll at a 7 or a 10 potentially for waking back up, so you're out of action anyways.
Right.
It's just very rare that you're ever going. Very rare as in I've never seen it in lots of playing Battletech that I can think of.
And that's
that has happened.
And that is totally fair. That is kind of funny. Yeah, this almost all of this complete chapter is just like, yeah, this doesn't really happen.
Right. This whole section has been if you run into a weird scenario, here's how you handle it. But it's not something you're going to deal with lots of times.
Right. This one I can see happening, just not often.
No.
So, let's see. Silent Mouse says, it happened last night. Shot in the head, passed out, took 20 points, fell over, took more damage, had 2 ammo explosions, but they were Gauss ammo. Well,
shot in the head, passed out, took 20 points, fell over, took more damage, and then had 2 ammo explosions. Gauss ammos don't explode though, so they're not subject to the ammo explosion rule, I believe.
That is going to be a total warfare question. So, unfortunately, going off of a game of Armored Combat, that one doesn't count. Not saying you're wrong, Silent Mouse, just saying we'd have to dig into the books for that one, which is not part of this, live stream series. But he does also say it was hilarious because it wasn't his mech, which is always true. It's always funnier when it's not you. So, all right, finish us off on this one.
Recovering consciousness. During the end phase of each turn, after the turn in which the mech warrior lost consciousness, the player rolls 2d6. If the result is equal to or greater than the consciousness number for the warrior's current damage points, the warrior regains consciousness. The player need not roll again to determine unconsciousness until the warrior takes new damage. For example, a mech warrior with 3 points of damage must make a single 2d6 roll in the end phase to wake up. A roll of 7+ means the warrior regains consciousness in that phase.
Okay, so just to clarify, because I was distracted by chat, consciousness roll is basically the same number, but to wake up.
Yes, the number to avoid falling asleep is the same number to wake up.
Fair enough.
We done.
Wow, we've finished other.
Right.
So, yeah. We made it sound a lot more complicated than it is, folks, but it's fine. All right. So, this we're still going to cover this. I mean, we already told them in the beginning we're going to cover this, but
you did kind of say that, yeah.
Right. But for people who came in late, okay. So I have a feeling this might be the most dry section that we've done. But it is one of those things where for Battletech, it's fun. There are thousands of designs out there, but you can do a lot. You can do a lot with it that, whether it's a design that you want to try or different weapon systems that, you don't see very often. There are a lot of good reasons to do it. The only thing that I would ask, as one of the Gaming with ADHD followers is don't be that guy. Okay. Don't be the guy that, that understands the math of the game that, all I really need are a whole bunch of small lasers that do next to no heat, but I can roll a whole mess load of dice and I'm just going to run up and stand in front of you and shoot you with them. Don't be that guy. That's not how any honest honest weapons designer would actually create it. So try to be creative. Have some fun with it. Don't be a dork.
But the rules say I can.
There's the spirit of the law and the letter of the law.
But I play games that are rules as written, right?
Again, there's the spirit of the law and there's the letter of the law. You can put rear-mounted leg lasers on your mech. Does that mean that you should put rear-mounted leg lasers on your mech?
No, you should not.
Actually, rear-mounted leg lasers is probably like the least offensive of the things you could do.
Right.
All right. Kick us off with construction, Chris.
The following system enables players to construct unique battle mechs that conform to the rules presented in this book. As these rules can be fairly math-intensive, designers are encouraged to do all work on scratch paper before committing the resulting design specifications to a blank battle mech record sheet. Now I'm going to pause here. If you're doing mech construction, don't do it on a blank mech sheet. There are thousands of things out there to use. Solaris Skunkworks, Mech Flex, all those types of things that will do all this stuff for you much faster than you doing it on a blank sheet and having other people question your math. It's 2025, folks. Act like it. There we go. All right, carry on. Battle mech basics. Battle mech construction relies on two primary factors, weight and space. Weight. Battle mech weights are measured in tons, with standard battle mechs weighing 20 to 100 tons. Battle mechs fall into four weight classes determined by their tonnage. Light battle mechs weigh 20 to 35 tons and are the lightest mechs commonly spotted on the battlefield. Because their armor and weapon options are usually limited, they often sacrifice both for speed and are favored as scouts or light security forces. Medium battle mechs weigh 40 to 55 tons and are the most common mech type. Typically balancing speed and firepower, they are favored as raiders and hunter killers. Heavy battle mechs weigh from 60 to 75 tons. They tend to be brawlers with average mobility and a wide range of weapons. They often serve as the heart of attack forces. Assault battle mechs weigh from 80 to 100 tons. Usually built for maximum firepower and armor, they tend to be far slower than most other mechs and so are favored for defensive, line breaking, or fire support roles.
Right. Space. Internal space, also called critical space, on a battle mech is illustrated and tracked by the critical hit table on the mech's record sheet, which abstractly describes the internal arrangement. So one thing to keep in mind, folks, the number of open critical slots is exactly the same regardless of the size of your mech. The limiting factor is going to be your tonnage, which determines how many things you can stick into it. All right. Let me start over. Internal space on a battle mech is illustrated and tracked by the critical hit table on the mech's record sheet, which abstractly describes the internal arrangement of a mech's body. Certain sections of this table are already filled in because the relevant components and equipment, actuators, cockpit systems, engines, and gyros must be housed in those specific body locations. The critical space table at the left summarizes the number of open critical slots, those not automatically assigned to specific equipment in every mech, such as the engine, gyro, life support, and sensors, in each location of a standard battle mech. As the mech's various design elements are chosen, they must be assigned to locations on the mech's body, and their required number of slots is allocated on its critical hit table. Each step in the design process to follow will explain any special rules for how the components added in that step are assigned to a mech. However, here are the general rules regarding critical slots and their use. All right, real quick, folks, I do want to specify, oh my gosh. There are many variations of these rules. Total Warfare gets a little bit more complicated, but then you start adding in books like Tactical Operations, Strategic Operations, and you can do some funky stuff with mech construction. We're not going to look at that in this particular series, but we do have some ideas on how we want to actually look at some of the additional rules. So look for that stuff to come out in the future. All right. Here are the general rules regarding critical slots and their use. No critical slot may accommodate more than one item at a time. Many items take up more than one critical slot. These must be specially noted as a single item on the tables. Critical slots for all multi-slot items must be contiguous. In other words, placed together in a row in their locations unless the item's construction rules specifically permit otherwise. On the record sheet, the arm and torso locations are broken into 2 6-slot sections. This only matters for determining critical hits. When placing items, ignore this and treat each of these locations as a single 12-slot location. For the most part, folks, this is not going to be an issue. Okay. Most of your weapons, can be fit perfectly fine. Where it says, like, unless the item's construction rules specifically permit otherwise, there's things like the arrow for artillery. Again, not covered in these rules, but it specifically says that it can be mounted both arm and torso. Basically because it needs, I want to say, like 10 critical slots on its own anyways. So, again, it'll specify if it's actually needed. It won't actually come up in these rules. All right. Increasing critical space. Removal of hand and or lower arm actuators can increase the amount of available critical slots in a location. The removal of a lower arm actuator requires that the hand actuator on that arm also be removed. This is kind of the only way to get extra critical slots. Pretty much every other case is going to be putting something into the mech, which means that the critical slot is going to be occupied. No, you cannot remove your feet or your lower leg actuators. Your torsos are fixed in size. So those are all going to remain as is. All right. Walk us through the design process.
The design process. The process of battle mech design is organized into 8 steps, each of which is fully described later in the section. Step 1, design the chassis. Determine the battle mech's weight and internal structure. Step 2, install the engine. Determine the battle mech's engine rating and weight. Step 3, add jump jets. Determine the battle mech's jump capability, if any. Step 4, install control systems. Determine the battle mech's gyro and cockpit. Step 5, add armor. Determine the armor weight and allocate armor points. Step 6, add additional heat sinks. Determine the number of locations if necessary for the battle mech's heat sinks. Step 7, install weapons and ammunition. Add weapons to the battle mech. Step 8, complete the record sheet. The above design process is a mere framework. The actual process, particularly after the chassis, engine, and control systems are determined, can involve a bit more flexibility as weapons, armor, and heat sinks are balanced for their best fit in terms of weight and space. For example, some designers may decide to assign armor as soon as they've chosen the engine and chassis, perhaps to maximize the mech's protection before dealing with heat sinks and weapons. Others may want to choose weapons first to see how many extra heat sinks would be needed. It may be useful to make copies of the mech record sheet to visually arrange the placement of weapons and equipment while tracking tonnage on a scrap piece of paper. Several construction options available to mechs have effects over and above the tonnage required or number of critical spaces occupied. When this is the case, they're supposed to be so noted in that construction step.
So
step 1. Go ahead.
Hold up. I was just gonna say, literally these steps, like outside of like the first 2 or 3, like they're guidelines. They're not, laws. What is it? The pirate code? It's more like a set of guidelines. Yeah.
It's kind of like a concept of a plan.
Right. It's a concept of a plan. Exactly. Because it like it said, you're going to like, oh, I'm going to put this way. Oh, okay. No, now I'm over tonnage or now I'm over heat. And so you're going to kind of go back and forth. Wait, I put all these weapons on it. And so I have 2 points of armor on everything. Okay. That's not quite enough. I'm running around with just internal structure. Okay. Mistakes were made, so there's a lot of back and forth with these. And so, you may get to step 7 and then realize you need to go back to step 4 and then hit step 6 and then to 8, you'll figure it out. All right. Step 1.
Design the chassis. The first step in battle mech design is the creation of the mech's basic framework or chassis. Choose weight. Under these rules, battle mechs may weigh up 20 to 100 tons. The total weight of the mech's engine, weapons, armor, and other components may not exceed the amount chosen. The total may fall below, but any unspent weight left over after the creation process is wasted tonnage, and the mech always counts as weighing the full amount for any gameplay purposes. So if you have a 70-ton if you have a 70-ton mech that you leave 5 tons off of, you still weigh 70 tons for purposes of fall damage, punch damage, all that sort of stuff.
Right. And one thing that Chris has skipped over a couple of times, but I do want to point out, it is 5-ton increments. You won't ever see a 72-ton mech or 63 or anything like that. It's always going to be in multiples of 5 with typically a minimum of 20, although there are a couple of exceptions, and a maximum of 100, again, with a couple of exceptions.
For these rules, 100 is max.
Right. For these rules, 20 to 100.
Add internal structure. Every battle mech has an internal structure, which represents its skeleton and joints. The weight of this structure depends on the weight of the mech and what structure type is chosen. The battle mech's mass and structure type also determines the number of internal structure points in each location. A designer must mark out any excess circles on the internal structure diagram, leaving behind only the number of circles in each location equal to the number of internal structure points in that location. There's a big old chart down here.
So basically, figure out your tonnage, then basically 10% of your weight is going to go to internal structure, and then here are the values for everything. So literally just copy the chart.
Yep. Internal structure points are fixed to their assigned locations based on the weight of the mech itself. The maximum amount of armor points a mech may carry is determined by the number of internal structure points per section. All locations except the HID may carry a maximum of twice the number of armor points as they have internal structure points, including any armor placed in rear locations. All head locations may receive a maximum of 9 armor points, regardless of weight of the mech. The internal structure table on page 50 provides the mass of the internal structure as well as the number of internal structure circles each location receives. Also provided is the maximum possible armor factor for mechs at each tonnage. Choose actuators. Some mechs have fully actuated arms and hands so they can pick up and carry things or to increase their ability in physical combat. Other mechs lack some or all of these actuators in order to free up more slots for weapons, to keep costs down, or just for appearance's sake. A mech that installs both hand and lower arm actuators in an arm can make punch and club attacks with that arm with no penalty. A mech with a lower arm actuator must also always install it directly underneath the upper arm actuator. If the mech has a hand actuator, it must always be installed underneath the lower arm actuator. The effects of not installing these actuators are as follows. No hand actuator. Add a +1 target modifier to all punches made with that arm. The mech cannot use that arm to pick things up or make clubbing attacks. No lower arm actuator. Add a +2 target number modifier to all punches made with that arm. Damage from punches with that arm is halved. No physical weapons can be placed in that arm. An arm without a lower arm actuator also has no hand actuator. Arm flipping. Any mech designed without both hand and lower arm actuators can flip both arms over and fire backwards.
All right. Step 2, install the engine. The second step is the installation of the mech's engine. This step establishes the key factors in the mech's mobility, its maximum speed, and the weight of its engine. It also determines how many jump jets can be installed. Every battle mech constructed under these rules must carry one fusion engine to power its movement, weapon systems, and other integral components. The output of this engine is measured by the mech's engine rating, which is determined by the mech's total weight and desired speed. To compute the engine rating, multiply the mech's tonnage by its desired walking movement points. The engine table on page 52 lists the tonnage for engines of various ratings. The mech's running movement points is also calculated at this time by multiplying its walking movement points by 1.5 and rounding up to the nearest whole number. So basically, the faster you want to go, the bigger the engine you're going to need. Which we'll look at that table real quick. So like engine rating of 20 and a 20-ton mech, you'd get one movement point, and it would only weigh half a ton. But like you're not going to be able to give a 20-ton mech a movement speed of 20 because then you need a 52.5-ton engine in your mech. So, basically it's a whole lot of trade-off. These giant engines, they sound great. Oh, I'm going to have a movement 400-ton Atlas. And then you're going to have no weapons because you put everything into your engine. So, for all intents and purposes, I think it does. Okay. One other thing, I am going to bring this up now, even though it's technically step 6. One other thing to keep in mind is that the rating of your engine tells you how many heat sinks are built into the engine. So,
i.e. they're free.
Right. I don't think they are free. They're right. A mech's fusion engine automatically provides 10 free heat sinks. They do not take up tonnage, but may occupy critical slots if the engine's rating is not high enough. So the catch here is that the bigger engines, you can pack the heat sinks into them without eating up slots. So like if you wanted to give your Atlas that 400 engine, well, it can carry 16 heat sinks in the engine. So you're not using up 6 more slots to fill up extra heat sinks. You're still going to need more heat sinks than the 16, but it doesn't fill it up.
That's why you run Gauss.
Also true. All right. Tell us about jump jets.
Jump jets. Battle mechs may optionally be equipped with jump jets to allow for short bursts of jumping movement. Jump jets are mounted singly, with each jet providing one jumping movement point. The weight of these depends on the weight of the mech and the MP desired. A mech with jump jets may have as many jump jets as it has walking MP. Jump jets may only be mounted in a mech's torso and leg locations. They do not have to be placed symmetrically, although this is almost always done. Each requires one critical slot.
Be aware, if they're not mounted symmetrically, your mech can only go the direction in which they're mounted. Right? No, it would be the opposite direction. Okay, it's not true, but it sounded funny. At least in my head.
If you want your 90-ton assault mech to jump, it's going to take a lot of weight.
Right. Also, yeah, that's the other thing to keep in mind is the jump jets do weigh different based on the size of your mech. Let's see. Is there? Nope, that's just the chart. Okay. Step 4, install control systems. This step sees the installation of a mech's control systems, the gyroscope that keeps it upright, and the cockpit system where the mech warrior resides during battle. A battle mech requires a powerful gyroscope to keep it upright and able to move. To determine the weight for a gyro, divide the mech's engine rating by 100 and round up the result up to the nearest whole number. The resulting number is the gyro's base weight. For example, the gyro on a mech with a 160 rated engine would weigh 2 tons. 160 divided by 100 equals 1.6, rounded up to 2. Every battle mech must have a cockpit, which contains the mech warrior's control station, life support system, and electronic sensors. A basic cockpit always weighs 3 tons. Armor.
Step 5, add armor. Armor protects the battle mech's internal structure and critical components. There is no minimum amount of armor. A mech may even have no armor if desired, though experience in war has shown this to be a bad idea. The maximum amount of armor a mech may mount is based on the number of internal structure points. For all locations but the head, the mount may mount twice as much armor points as it has internal structure in that location. For example, if an arm has 9 points of internal structure, it may carry up to 18 points of armor. Torso locations divide this maximum between their front and rear sides. Most designs focus more armor towards the front, as mechs tend to sustain more frontal combat damage. The head is an exception in that all mechs may always be built with up to 9 armor points in the head, regardless of the mech's weight or any other factor. Armor may be mounted in full or half-ton lots and provide 16 points per ton, 8 points per half-ton. Sometimes reaching a desired number of points, such as many maximum armor factors, may force the design to waste weight on points that cannot be mounted. For example, 105 armor points is the maximum that can be installed on a 30-ton mech. 5.5 tons of armor only gets you 104 points. To have the full 105 points, it requires 6 tons of armor, but would result in 7 points of wasted armor. Use the armor diagram on the blank mech record sheet to indicate the number of armor points protecting each part of the mech's body. Mark out any excess armor circles in the same way as you did for the internal structure diagram. Armor points do not have to be placed symmetrically, although in practice this is almost always done.
And, let's be honest, people, losing out on 1 or 2 points of your maximum armor is not, is not a good reason to waste an extra half ton to make sure it's topped up. I mean, if you don't have anything else you can add, maybe, but generally being at 104 instead of the full 105 is just fine. All right. Step 6, add additional heat sinks. The heat sinks that dissipate heat produced by a mech's movement, weapons fire, and other actions may be allocated at this time. At this stage, however, the give and take of battle mech designs begins to come into play, and so the player can skip this step for now, leaving the heat sinks until after assigning the mech's weapons and equipment. Mech's fusion engine automatically provides 10 free heat sinks. These do not take up tonnage, but may occupy critical slots if the engine's rating is not high enough. Additional heat sinks may be installed beyond this free amount at a cost of 1 ton per heat sink. There are no special restrictions on heat sink placement. Each may be placed wherever the designer can and wishes to fit it. Multiple heat sinks do not have to be grouped together. Note that heat sinks dissipate double their normal heat each turn if in water, making leg placement ideal. The larger the mech's engine, the more heat sinks it can store. While smaller engines are unable to store the full complement of 10 free heat sinks a fusion engine provides, let alone any additional heat sinks. To find the number of heat sinks that they may be considered integral or critical free, or integral, divide the mech's engine rating by 25 and round the result down. Or simply consult the table. All right. If heat sinks beyond the free 10 are added to a mech, those stored in the engine still weigh 1 ton each, but do not occupy criticals. These sinks are considered an integral part of the engine, and so can only be destroyed if the engine is destroyed. So there's good reasons to take those giant engines sometimes. All right. Tell us about our weapons.
Add weapons and ammo, the fun part of building the mech. The weapons and ammunition available to battle mechs are listed in the weapons and equipment table. In addition to any heat, damage, and range statistics, these tables provide the tonnage and critical slots each item occupies. Space. All weapons and equipment must be allocated to the critical hit table in a contiguous series within the same location. They may therefore not be placed in a location that has fewer open critical slots than the equipment requires. However, an AC-20 may be split between any two adjacent locations, not including the legs. If so, it automatically receives a more restrictive firing arc of the two locations. For example, if a mech carries an AC-20 split between its left torso and left arm, the weapon uses the torso arc, not the arm arc. I'd like to note that it doesn't say I can't put my AC-20 in a head, so I'm going to try that for our next game. Weapon arcs. Mine's always been a little bit slow, folks. Just saying.
You know what? I had never considered such a thing, and that's funny. All right.
Weapon arcs. Go ahead. Say it.
No, I just thought it was funny.
There you go. Weapon arcs. Weapons placed in the torso, leg, or head locations may have a forward or rear firing arc. Rear firing weapons must be so noted when installed. Torso and head-mounted items receive the firing arc of the mech's torso. Arm-mounted weapons receive the firing arc appropriate to that arm. Leg-mounted weapons may receive either a forward or rearward firing arc. A mech needs at least 1 ton of ammo for each ballistic or missile weapon. The ammo column of the weapons and equipment table notes how many shots a weapon carries per ton. Ammunition is stored in ammo bins. Each ammo bin, whether half ton or full ton, occupies 1 critical slot. Multiple ammunition bins of the same type need not be contiguous. See ammo on page 32 for more details.
So here are examples of everything being assigned to the critical slots. So got ammo in the torso, got LRMs. Notice the little bracket grouping these together, saying that all of this is one weapon system. Then got engines, gyros, all your, most of this will be pre-filled in. I'm gonna excuse me for a second. Kim's stray cat was attacking the couch.
My outdoor team.
You're not technically part of the family, cat. Tearing up my couch is not going to be a good idea. All right. Sorry about that. All right. We then have, a big chart, different weapons. Basically, you want to pay attention here to the tonnage, the critical slots, and then how much ammo per ton of the appropriate ammunition. Holy crap, that's it? Oh, wait. Oh, there we go. I'm like, no, we can't be done yet. Hold on a second, folks. All right. Sorry about that, folks. Okay. Step 8, complete the record sheet. By the time the designer has chosen all structure, engine, and controls for the battle mech and added the armor, weapons, and equipment, all items must be allocated their proper places on the blank mech record sheet. Any weight not allocated by this stage is considered wasted tonnage. By this point, all components on the mech should have been placed on the critical hit table. If any remain, consult the space section for details on how to assign components to critical slots and each design step for placement instructions specific to that step. Any slot not filled during this process is assumed to have a roll again on it. The mech's record sheet must have all data filled in for the mech data block, including name, tonnage, and movement points. So that's going to be this right here. All items and components with critical slots must be distributed on the critical hit table. This. Including armor, engine, gyro, extra heat sinks, weapons, as well as ammunition and number of shots per bin. All extraneous armor and internal structure points must be blacked out on the armor and internal structure diagrams. So on a blank record sheet, there will be a lot more armor and internal structure bubbles. So just pre-fill in the ones that you don't need. And then finally, heatsink data must be filled in on the heat data block with extraneous heat circles blacked out or new ones drawn in if necessary. So here are all of the heat sinks. So this is one place where I wish they would have taken a record sheet and hand drawn stuff in it. Make it look like you've been filling it out. Because like right here, it's like, okay, fill in extraneous heat sink bubbles. What extraneous heat sink bubbles? It has 15. There's 15 circles. Anyways. But that's it. And you've built a battle mech. Congratulations. Any final comments, concerns, or otherwise?
Use Gauss rifles.
Use Gauss rifles. They don't exist in this version. They haven't been rediscovered yet. Don't worry, folks. We'll cover Gauss rifles when we get to the Clan Invasion book. But I'll save that for the end. All right. Weapons and equipment. Now, this is just a little bit of a fluff section, just so that you understand some of the terminology, especially as you're going through doing mech construction on your own, so you understand what they are. Surface. Why is the cockpit not funnier? I don't know, Seraphis. But I'm not going to repeat the Fat Electrician's alternate names for cockpit. Anyways, let's see here. This section describes the most common weapons and equipment used by Inner Sphere forces. Game rules for many more weapons and other items can be found in the Battle Mech Manual, or Total Warfare, or Tactical Operations, or I think Strategic Operations. Trying to think. Or, you know what? At this point, make your own stuff up. That could be done too. Don't do that, but you can. Let me rephrase that. Be careful.
Don't be that guy.
Don't be that guy. Exactly.
Looking at you, Ben.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Autocannons. Autocannon, often abbreviated as AC, is a general term for modern mech scale cannons. which have a wide variety of calibers, firing speeds, and munition types. Some fire a single massive round, others are shotgun-like weapons, and still others are high-speed Gatling-like cannons that spew out a large number of rounds in a short span of time. The simple real-world example of an autocannon is an A10 Warthog, main gun. That would be an autocannon.
That would be the rotary autocannon. Your autocannon that's not rotary is more like a tank weapon, a main tank weapon.
Others are high-speed Gatling-like cannons. No, rotary autocannon, I think, is something I think is something still different.
Maybe. I don't. What it's saying is they can do any number of different things. They don't care what thing they says it does. In some of the games, they spew out a number of bullets. On some, they shoot one round. It's just talking about any of these type things work for autocannons.
It's going to take a really big bullet and shoot it at you. That's what it does. All right. Flamers are a catch-all term for the wide variety of flamethrowers in use by the armed forces of the 31st century. Most tap into the mech's own reactor for the ravening heat necessary. Lasers. The laser, its name originates from the ancient acronym Light Amplification by Stimulated Emission of Radiation, is the most basic of modern battlefield energy weapons, designed to deliver a concentrated burst of extreme heat to a small area. Military-grade lasers can gouge through military-grade armors in a fraction of a second. And then machine guns. The machine gun has been favored as the quintessential anti-infantry weapon since the first crude models appeared in the 19th century. All right. Give us the rest of them.
Missile launchers. Missile launchers are devices used to deliver self-propelled and self-guided munitions to inflict damage on a target. Long-range missiles fire salvos of high-explosive missiles at distant targets. Because of the way they are fired, LRMs suffer penalties while trying to hit targets near the firing mech. SRMs are short trajectory missiles with high-explosive or armor-piercing explosive warheads. Compared to LRMs, they have a shorter range but compensate with a more powerful payload.
Just remember, folks, they're able to teleport until they're fired.
Particle projection cannons. The particle projector cannon, PPC for short, is one of the most powerful non-ballistic weapons ever devised for the modern battlefield. Consisting of a magnetic accelerator firing high-energy proton or ion bolts, PPCs have been used for centuries to flay armor through kinetic and thermal damage. Physical weapons. Physical weapons are a wide variety of cutting, bashing, or slashing weapons mounted on the battle mechs. These range from mech-sized claws to ornate blades to massive pulverizing maces. The most common physical weapon by far is the hatchet.
Ta-da!
We done!
We finished one of the books. Sort of. Actually, no, we haven't finished one of the books. We finished today's episode.
We finished all the points of the book that are relevant and are rules-based.
I will accept your argument for now. Anyways. So yeah, short answer, folks. This is Game of Armored Combat. This is Battletech at its most concentrated. I don't like calling it basic. Like they stripped a lot of stuff out of it, but it's like when I started playing, this was the rules. This is what you had access to. So it really this is what I would consider core Battletech. But it's fun. I like the options. It's one of the reasons that I've always loved the game. It's just the amount of things that you can do with it.
Right.
So, all right. So, little bit of housekeeping, folks. Next week we are going to talk about scenarios. We skipped over that section of the book. Mostly because talking about scenarios is a little bit boring. But what we're going to do is we're also going to talk about some of the scenarios that we've used for actually playing our home games. Because while Battletech is really easy to just put mechs down and blow stuff up, sometimes having a scenario, having something to do, just adds to the challenge, adds to the fun. And I actually prefer playing that way. So,
I mean, if we didn't have scenarios, then I could always just roll up with a Turkina and a couple Vipers and just shoot you from long range and run around and try and DFA you from above and not really give you much counterplay. But if I find out the scenarios, I have to rush to the middle of the table and then get back to the middle of the table and survive, then I'm probably not going to take the 95-ton Turkina because that's not a good fit for the map. And so it builds variety and it promotes tactical thinking to have these different options instead of always just taking your favorite mech that blows up stuff really well.
Right. So yeah, that's the other great thing about scenarios is it's going to make you try different things, bring mechs that you haven't used before. There's a lot of fun stuff that you can do with it, and we're going to talk about that next week. But then after next week, we are going to take a break from Battletech. The original plan was for us to go through the Game of Armored Combat, Clan Invasion, and then Mercenaries booklets. But because Chris is a good husband and father, he has asked for a little bit of a break, between each of the books so that his wife doesn't murder him, which I can support that.
Which, the break or the murdering of me?
Yes.
And on that note, folks, we're out of here. Have a great night.
All right. Well, yeah. Come back next week, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.